Zoom calls. It might be some of our first times actually orchestrating one. So we're going to be passing the host and the shared screens back and forth among us. You'll have an opportunity to give us some input for a poll later. And then we'll also, as Jody mentioned, have some breakout rooms. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. With that, I am going to turn the reins over to our board secretary, Jody Zaranin, who has a lot of experience with her local trail. Her local trail is Camp Chase, and she was the co-founder of Friends of the Camp Chase Trail, along with another board member of ours, Chris Hadesy. In 2015, she became part of the group that put together the Camp Chase Trail Hilltop Action Plan. They identified local trail needs, and out of that became a group formed called the Columbus West Side Running Club. This group is wonderful. They are on the trail weekly, they're running, they have cleanups, they beautify the trail. I believe they also plant flowers, that sort of thing. And they also hold an annual Hilltop USA 5K that the Ohio to Erie Trail Board voted that we're a sponsor of every year. So it's a really fun event. With no further delay, Jody Zaranin.
Thank you, Lisa. And I did want to add one thing. We'll have a break at the midway point so people can take care of what they need to take care of. Lisa, thank you for that warm introduction. And we're thrilled to see everybody here on this beautiful, we got the perfect day. We have snow, but the sun is out. So at least where I am. Well, today I want to share with you our exciting speaker today. Through her company, Cycle Forward, Amy is a trails and tourism consultant. She's a placemaker and a professional coach. She helped launch the nationally recognized Trail Town program and now consults communities on how they can expand the way they approach trails and tourism. Today, she will share the backstory of trail towns and how trail communities around the U.S. benefit from connecting to their trails. Using the framework of her forthcoming book, Deciding on Trails, she will also address how Ohio rail trails and trail networks might see similar results. Let's give a warm welcome for Amy Camp. Hello, Amy.
Hi, Jody. Thank you so much. I appreciate everything that you and Tom and Lisa have done to get us to today. And I'm looking forward to spending the next couple of hours with everybody here. We are really going to be thinking today about the concept of trail towns. The workshop is titled Deciding on Trails, and I'll tell you more about that in a bit. But for now, today's promise includes helping you to develop a better understanding of trail towns, what that phrase means exactly, and how it's been applied in different places around the country. I will also share some best practices related to trail communities and ideas for how Ohio communities can benefit from better connecting to their trails, and also how Ohio communities already are. We will have a very brief break, about 5 minutes, and that will be sometime around 12:15 or 12:20, just so you know. And we're also promising an interactive experience. To listen to me talk for 2 hours straight would not be ideal. So we're going to try to make it as interactive as possible, and I hope that you're up for that. So with that being said, we do have a poll to help get us started. So Tom, if you were in the position to launch that poll, that would be great. Okay, so the question is, which of the following is a characteristic of a trail town? A community located along a trail, a label or designation that a community earns by participating in a trail town initiative, a community that holds a trail-friendly mentality, or all of the above? if you would just take a moment and fill in your answer. And Tom, whenever you feel that we've had enough responses, you can go ahead and share the results. Okay, bright group. All of the above, 94%. And those who answered the other answers wouldn't be wrong either. This is sort of a trick question in terms of what it means to be a trail town. And let me give you a great example of a community that meets all of those criteria. It's located along a trail, a number of trails. It holds a trail friendly mentality, and it also has a trail town designation, and that would be Milford, Ohio. I'm sure that a lot of you know Milford. Maybe some of you live in or near Milford. Feel free to pop it in the chat if so. But this is I've only been to Milford once, and I was really quite impressed with the number of communities that or trails that pass through the community. And whenever I was there, I just was really taken aback by the feeling of the community. There was a trail culture or a trail vibe that you just couldn't miss. And, you know, the way that showed up in my view was there were just bikes everywhere and trail signs everywhere. Bikes propped up in storefronts, bike racks, you know, other like, you know, hiking friendly kind of signals. And I went on to include Milford in a report that I wrote about trail communities. And I had a chance to talk with Emily White of Roads, Rivers, and Trails, the local outfitter. And what she says here at the top really stood out to me. What really makes a town is the kind of services it offers. We like to pamper our visitors. And then she talked a lot more about how she and her business partners were influenced by their Appalachian Trail experience and wanted to provide an accommodating, welcoming, hospitable experience in their business. And they go so far as sometimes giving people rides to the laundromat, buying them a beer, that sort of thing. So there's definitely a willingness and a desire to connect with trail users and to better serve them. That comes across both with the outfitter and just around town. Here's a pedicab that I spotted while I was there, just hanging out on the sidewalk. Trail signs. Whenever you come across the river, you have the local craft brewery on the right. You can see the bike rack there. You can see the sign that says this is a Buckeye Trail Town. And then businesses that also seem to have nothing to do with trails or tourism. You know, you see bikes, you know, in their merchandise, like here in this photo. So that's just a little bit about Milford. I wanted to then get into the history of trail towns. So some of you probably are familiar with this term. Maybe you already are located in a trail community or a designated trail town, but I'm going to give you the history here. So I was a part of the first staff to implement the Trail Town program along the Great Allegheny Passage. That program was established in 2007. It was a project of my former employer, the Progress Fund, as well as the Allegheny Trail Alliance, which is the trail group that manages that trail. By the way, if you know this program or if you have ridden the Gap, go ahead and put that in the chat. Unfortunately, as the presenter, I can't see any of the chat comments, but I encourage you all to let each other know. This is a map of the Great Allegheny Passage, which goes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Cumberland, Maryland, and there connects with the C&O Canal towpath going on to Washington, D.C. And all of these communities along the Gap that are indicated on the map are mostly rural, post-industrial, small towns. And back in the early 2007, the Allegheny Trail Alliance recognized that the communities weren't quite connecting with the trail. in the way that was known to be possible, and they weren't quite benefiting in the way that was known to be possible. There was just sort of like this missed connection or a misunderstanding of the trail and trail users. And so what happened was the Allegheny Trail Alliance got together with our statewide entity that manages the Main Street program here in Pennsylvania, and created a program that was inspired by Main Street. So if you're familiar with Main Street, the idea is to help traditional downtown areas to revitalize. And so, the idea was to take this approach and to apply it to these trail communities along the Gap. What sparked the idea? Quite simply, it was missed economic opportunity. It was the fact that these communities had a lot of cyclists coming through and coming by, and there was just this disconnect, as I mentioned, and so the desire was to help to better prepare communities to benefit from the trail and its users. To go way back to the middle of the last century, I do think that the way that we got into trail towns is because of abandoned rail lines. And so what set the stage was this combination of abandoned rail lines in the 1960s and 1970s, and the first rail trails popping up. There was this, there were all of these corridors that were converted to a new kind of trail. So that's part of what set the stage for trail towns. The other thing was the rise of the shopping mall during the second half of the last century. What happened whenever all of these new shopping malls were built? Well, people took their shopping to the malls, and some traditional downtown retailers took their businesses to the malls. And so the National Main Street Center was opened in 1980 to try to help to revitalize downtown areas. And so this combination of having the availability of rail corridors and the existence of the Main Street program, something that could be modeled in trail communities, resulted in having a readily available asset, as well as a model for leveraging that asset. So that's just a little bit about how I think we got to trail towns. Getting back to the Great Allegheny Passage, we created a program. The visionaries created the program, and myself and my colleagues had the pleasure of implementing it. And again, this is 2007 by the time that we launched the program. And I'm going to walk you through some of the components of what made our Trail Town program along the Gap work. First and foremost, it was regional in nature. This is a community development program that was connecting multiple communities across multiple counties and eventually 2 states. That was a part of what made it work and what made it attractive to funders who helped to support the program. Early in the program, we completed community assessments. This is developing our baseline understanding of the downtown areas. What would happen is community members and people from other nearby communities would get together and walk around a town. This is the town of Connellsville. And the idea was to look at, to imagine first impressions for trail users. How does it look and feel to be entering town? Just a lot about the physical streetscape and sense of hospitality, available services, business hours, that sort of thing. And this happened in every single of the trail communities so that we could understand how the communities were being perceived and what the opportunities were to make improvements. We also did a lot of economic and trail use research, which I'll get to in just a slide or two. But that became an important part of our understanding what was happening with trail use and the trail economy at a regional scope. Another part that was special about our particular program was it was housed in a nonprofit community development financial institution. And what that means is that's a nonprofit organization that is able to make business loans. And they made business loans, the Progress Fund, to small businesses in the tourism and hospitality industry. So it was an ideal pairing, in terms of, our program staff being able to do some of the traditional community development and tourism work, and then the loan officers of the Progress Fund helping to support small business investors. So I mentioned that already, the access to capital. We spent a lot of time on brand development and marketing. We were working with the Allegheny Trail Alliance and with the visitor bureaus to brand not only the trail experience, but also the communities along the trail. And infrastructure and amenities was another important part of our program. Whenever we started our program, this sign, for example, did not exist. The trail was built by a number of different local trail organizations over 3 decades, and there was every which type of sign. And it took some time to develop a brand and to have infrastructure like signs and bike racks, public art, information kiosks put into place. We, at the time, considered our program to be a regional approach to rural economic development, and it was. This person to the right, she was with me on a trail trip a couple of years ago, and we're in a cute little grocery store, and she's buying all of these local jams and apple butters, and trail. Most of you, I'm sure, are trail users, and a part of the experience is going into town and shopping and supporting the local economy. And so to that point, in 2012, we found that $50 million in direct annual spending in the region was attributed to the Great Allegheny Passage and its users. That was up from $40 million in 2008 and just over $7 million in 2002. So again, whenever the Allegheny Trail Alliance in the early 2000s realized there were missed opportunities, that's looking at this $7.2 million number and knowing that more was possible. By the way, the Allegheny Trail Alliance commissioned an updated research study in 2020 and have yet to release the results, but it will be very interesting to see what's happened over the last 8 years. So this being said, economic development was a very important part of that program, but Aldo Leopold said, a system of conservation based solely on economic self-interest is hopelessly lopsided. This is a quote that guides me in my consulting work as I work with trail communities. I think that the economic piece is obviously really important, but I also believe very firmly that we need to think about trails and trail towns more holistically than that. This is a graphic that I developed just to show, in my view, what it means to be a trail town. At simplest, it's a town along a trail. But then beyond that, the town has to in some way embrace the trail. And there should be a trail economy that is possible and that exists in that community. But to me, a trail town in the truest sense is one in which the trail becomes an integral part of the community's identity. I'll talk a little bit more about that later when I talk about trail culture. Another way of putting it is it's a decision to pay attention to trails. Jody mentioned my book. My book will be out soon and I'll show that to you. But the book is called Deciding on Trails. And that's because I believe that every community that's located along the trail, a trail, has the opportunity to make a decision whether to embrace it and to invest in it. This is a town in rural Iowa, Madrid, Iowa, and the town is along the High Trestle Trail. And what you see here with the sign on the right, which is right along the trail, is the decision to pay attention to trails. If you would just notice the little arch near the top of this directional sign, here it is on the High Trestle Trail Bridge. This bridge is very much the centerpiece of the High Trestle Trail. And this was an investment, by the way, to decide to not just, create this bridge to span this river valley, but they also made it an outstanding piece of public art. They light the arches by night, and this has become a real attraction. You all of a sudden have a 24-mile trail that might have been just like most any other rail trail around the country, but because they did this, it's become a destination trail. So what happened after the Trail Town program along the Great Allegheny Passage was in place for a couple of years was that other trail advocates and other places started to take notice to this and develop their own programs. Just a few years after we had started ours, the Canal Towns Partnership started a program along the C&O. Around the same time, the Appalachian Trail Conservancy created a community program. And what's so cool about this is that all of a sudden there's this program that was created for a 150-mile rail trail was being used along a 2,200-mile footpath. And then the Appalachian Trail, being a national scenic trail, inspired other national scenic trails to create programs as well. The North Country Trail program was next, for example. In Ohio, a lot of you are probably familiar with the Buckeye Trail Town program. That also was created pretty early on in the history of trail towns. And in Kentucky, that was another early one. The state's tourism agency decided to operate a program out of a state agency. So those are just a few of the marks of some of the early programs. I wanted to also show you a map that I recently created. This map shows what states and provinces have a trail town presence of some sort. So the ones that are shaded in green are ones that have some kind of a program that exists in their state or province. And there are, I think, something like 26 or 27 that are highlighted here. So something that just started in Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, has really over the last 15 years taken hold and taken on a life of its own. The two basic program models as I see it, there's a trail specific model like the one we did on the Gap or the one that exists on the Buckeye Trail. That's sort of like the earliest model of trail towns. But then Kentucky came along and created a program out of the state. So did Florida, so did Michigan. So this is just to give you a very basic understanding of what's possible. It's been adapted to trails of every type. And let's talk just for a second about Ohio. I understand that having trail towns developed is spelled out in the Ohio Trails vision. I am not personally aware of any steps that have been taken to create any kind of a statewide designation or program, but am encouraged by the fact that, the trail town concept was written into the Ohio Trails vision. So there is at least some thinking at a state level about the importance of trail communities better connecting to their trails. A couple of more slides here about sort of like the background of trail towns. These are some of the potential benefits of having a trail town initiative along your trail or in your community. There's an opportunity to tie into a larger trail town brand. For example, this is Dayton, Ohio. This is a trail town sign that they received for becoming a designated Buckeye Trail Town. And it ties visually into the existing brand, and the communities that are part of it get to say that they're trail friendly, that they're designated trail towns, that they have some kinds of services to offer to trail users. A lot of times programs have signs like the one you see as you're entering town. Trail communities that are a part of a program often have access to resources and education, and a larger trail community. You have the ability a lot of the time through a program like this to get to know a business owner from 3 or 4 towns over and develop a relationship with them. There's an increased pride of place that tends to occur. There's a collaborative problem solving. You're not just thinking at a single community level. You are a part of a series of communities and can think about approaching problems and opportunities regionally. And as I indicated before, trail users can associate your community as being trail friendly and having something to offer to them. In terms of becoming a trail town, unless you are located in along a trail that already has an existing program, there really is no barrier. It's a matter of you and your neighbors and your neighboring communities deciding to create some kind of a program that would allow for trail town designations. There's really no barrier to entry. You build your own program. That whenever I showed you that map of North America, that's how it happened. People learned from existing programs and created what would work for them regionally. So let me just check here and see how we're doing on time. Okay, we're doing great on time. So I wanted to just take a few minutes here to have you consider what brings you to trail towns. I mentioned with the gap that it was that missed economic opportunity, lack of visitor services, like these were some of the issues or problems that led to the creation of that program. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that a lot of communities that are interested in trail towns are interested because there's just something that's missing or not working in their communities. If you're familiar with the concept of community pain points, this is what I'm talking about. A pain point, by the way, is a problem, real or perceived. It's just something that's painful for at the individual level and sometimes at the community level. For example, here are some that tend to come up in trail communities. The first four for certain are ones that, or the first three are ones that existed along the gap: unmet visitor needs, missed economic opportunity, loss of industry. These were issues that existed then and in some sense still exist, but the Trail Town program was created to try to address them. So with that, what I'd like to do is share a video with you on pain points. And after you have seen that video, we are going to, fingers crossed, send you into breakout rooms to have a brief discussion about pain points. So let's start with the video. Fair warning to those who have earbuds in, I understand that this may come off as being a little bit loud, so just want to let you know about that. So, the video demonstrates that there are a whole lot of issues happening in our communities, right? Some of the things that you saw were very directly related to trails or tourism. And some of them seem to have nothing to do with trails, but that's the point. To have a vibrant and resilient community, we as trail advocates cannot be stuck in our trail bubble. We have to be aware of what's happening around us. And it's also hard for people to spend time to commit to trails, to invest in trails whenever there are other issues happening in communities. And you saw with every time that one of the blocks was pulled, the foundation became weaker until it finally collapsed on itself. And so I ask you to take just that holistic view of communities and what makes them work and what makes them sometimes weaker into your small group conversation as you think about pain points and problems that are occurring in your communities. So whenever you go into those small groups, you will have 5 minutes together. And I ask you to think about this question or to answer this question. What pain points in your community might be alleviated by better connecting to trails? And if you're doing great on time, you can also just, take the conversation wherever you'd like to. So go ahead into the groups, take a minute just to like introduce yourself to each other, show your video if you're in the position to do so, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Hi, folks. You'll receive an invitation on your screen that says you've been invited to a breakout room, and then we'll also send a reminder when there's about 1 minute left. So here we go. Enjoy.
Okay, Jody, we have just a small little group of us that are not in a room someplace, and that's okay. We can just hang tight. Or if you want to talk about pain points, we can do that too. In the meantime, I'm just going to scroll through these comments and see if there are any questions I can answer
great,
or anything.
great. I think Aaron's on the phone, but
Dawn Durkee was asking if they will have access to today's PowerPoint.
it's up to you.
Yeah.
Said we.
Well, she'll have access to the recording, correct?
We are recording it, so.
Mm-hmm.
And I did for the PDF that you had posted, and I said that this was, the basis for it too.
Mm-hmm.
So that should hopefully help. But
okay, and I can turn this one into a PDF as well.
Okay, if you're willing, that's great.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I better be watching the time here. We did pretty good.
Yeah. It is so unnerving when you're presenting and you're sharing your screen because all you see is your full screen share and you can't see any of the chat or anything.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just kind of like you can't see faces, but that's okay. I trust that you'll let me know if there's anything that is needs to be addressed.
It's going well. A lot of folks don't have their camera on, but the ones that do are being attentive. Yeah, so tell me. So maybe at like 12 after, we'll give them the 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah, good. That worked out.
A lot of discussion about apps in the chat.
Oh, about the apps, yes. We'll get there. I mean, we offer the map online, but we don't have that yet. But well, and we have Aaron Duffy and Ed Coleman are probably on the phone and not able to join the breakouts. Did either of you want to share anything about noticing anything in your community that is a pain point, something that might open the invitation to embracing trails? And unmute yourself if you do want to share.
And if you don't, that's okay. We'll catch you in a minute when we have everyone back.
Maybe I need to unmute them if they're on the phone.
Good question.
Yeah, I guess they have to unmute themselves. I am not able to do it from here.
Okay. And what are we about ready to bring everyone back together?
I think that sounds good. So when I hit close all rooms, it should give them a 1 minute. Yeah, it'll be a 1 minute countdown. So they're all, and then they'll just be invited back. Okay, great. All participants have been given 60 seconds to return. I'm going to unmute myself, but
Okay. Okay, it looks like we have everyone back. Thank you for taking the time to go into the groups and to have that discussion. You might notice in the chat that there are a couple of questions there. I just wanted to ask you to take a look at that and to share in the chat. You know, what pain points were discussed in your breakout, or if you'd rather answer, what's something that someone shared in your group that you found to be interesting or helpful. So let's just take a moment. Yeah, Bill, those things are an abrupt ending. It's just a part of Zoom. It's just, you just get popped out of a room just like that. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and give people a chance to put some of their insights into the chat. This replaces a traditional in-person report out. Oh, come on. Quiet group today. Remember, this is to be interactive. Okay. Thank you, Tom. So economic impact, of course, making town officials and businesses more aware of the value of the trail. Julie, you said you had a mixture of people in your group with lots of requests for better connections. I assume better physical connections between trail and town. We're going to talk about that. The need for more funding sources to help get trails built. Getting the local leadership to understand the value of investing in trails. Greater awareness. We talked about the problems affecting our individual towns. Thanks, Bill. Have structure and program in place and be able to share towns that can champion the value. The value of trails just keeps coming up again and again here. Is there anyone who said something about the value of trails that would like to elaborate? You can actually unmute yourself if you'd like to. I'm taking it that a lot of your communities are you just go ahead. I hear somebody starting.
It's Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I can speak a little bit to our session. We talked about in the north central corridor of the trail, we have several towns that have good attributes to be trail towns. Galena, which opened up a variety of restaurants and bars and a coffee shop, and in neighboring Sunbury, which would be the next town north on the trail, has an amazing selection of businesses and restaurants, and heading up into Mount Vernon. But a lot of people, something that was voiced was that how do you get the businesses and elected officials on board? And for an example, I'm not going to say this is really happening in Galena. Let's say in Galena, the people in Delaware County need to talk about trail towns, and if they've tried and got nothing back from those businesses and elected officials, it's kind of like, where should they go next? That's what they're looking for. I believe that was the discussion we had.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thanks for sharing. Rachel, could I put you on the spot because your comment is so interesting, and I'm kind of curious to know more about your group discussion.
Yeah, I was just sharing that I work for a trail advocacy group in Southwest Ohio, and a lot of the times when we're talking about trails and making regional connections, there's just a lot of segregation and a lot of lack of access in certain communities to recreation, to transportation. So when we're thinking about planning or proposing where trails should go, where infrastructure should go, we try to focus on communities who might have lack of access to that, or to transportation, to food, to grocery stores, things like that. We think that trails offer another mode of transportation. And so we think that they add a lot in terms of socioeconomic access.
Yeah, yep, absolutely they do. And thank you for sharing that. One of the best practices we're going to be looking at is what I call extending the invitation, of inviting trail users into town. But I believe just as important or more important is that we are inviting town residents out to the trail and making that invitation appealing, and having the infrastructure and the connections in place that make it more easily possible for people. So it's just so important. I think over the years we've been very highly visitor focused in the world of trails, and that's for good reason. But we also have to create the culture that would make our town residents want to find trails as a resource. Anyone else want to share something? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in.
Go ahead.
Just one of the things that I was going to add, one of the things I really appreciated, Brian reached out to me, and I have a little bed and breakfast in Akron. Apparently guests were leaving and they were hiring Brian on the Ohio Trail Shuttle. So Brian started actually introducing me to people, giving me referrals. So after 2 or 3 guests came and said, yeah, Brian told me about you. I said, who's this Brian guy? So Brian and I haven't actually met, but he swung by my house and he dropped off some rack cards for me, which I do give out to guests now. And I'm hoping at some point he and I are going to get a chance to meet this year. But I've recently redeveloped my site, and I really like that the OTET has the link to Friends on the Trail. And I'd love to see some of us along this trail try to be more supportive of one another on the trail. And I've made it an effort. I've created Friends of Barrett Bed and Breakfast. So I've actually created a link where I'm going to specifically list friends. And then I've tried to highlight the OTET on my website, which obviously it's going to attract people. Plus, I'm also trying to support the cause and the trail, so on and so forth. So Akron's kind of a unique area. We've got the canals, we've got the trail. So there's quite a bit going on. There's the Cuyahoga Valley train line. So I think there's good infrastructure, and it's supportive of what you're talking about trying to accomplish. I'd love to see some more signs or just more awareness, but I just love to see us all kind of come together and, you know, having the ability to develop some relationships and cross promote and support one another. So I guess that would be my comment.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that was not a planted comment, but that like really supports everything that we're trying to share today, that I'm trying to share today, that this is about partnerships, it's about relationships, and it doesn't go one way. It goes both ways and probably out in multiple directions. That's what makes trails and trail tourism work. Somebody else was starting to share something. Oh, there's Brian. Is this the Brian?
This is the Brian with Ohio Trail Shuttle. Or the,
Okay.
but anyway, just to notice on the trails over the years, one of the things for economic development is if you don't have a dedicated way for people to get to your downtown, many people just bypass you.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid to ride on even a couple blocks to your downtown on a street. And that is like, I was looking at Canal Fulton. Many people probably ride past Canal Fulton because they don't know it's there, or they just don't want to take the bridge over into the downtown area of Canal Fulton.
Yeah.
So,
that's good insight. And thank you for that. And that actually sets up the next section. Can everyone see my PowerPoint again? So if someone could give me a verbal yes or no, because I can't see the faces right now.
I don't see a PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, I need to restart my share. Okay. All right, there we go. So the next section, which we will get to after our brief break, is about some best practices, including making some of those physical connections. It's called 7 Practices of Healthy Trail Towns. That's actually the subtitle of my book, Deciding on Trails. So this is the self-promotional part of the entire experience today. This is an image of my cover. The book will actually be published around the end of this month, so I probably won't really be putting it out there for people until early January. But if anyone wants to make sure that they see an announcement about this book, you can just sign up for my Read First list on my website, cycleforward.org, and I'll send you the first chapter so you can get an idea of what it's all about. But in the book, I cover these 7 practices, which we will talk about whenever we're finished with our 5-minute break. So why don't you go ahead, take 5 minutes. If you want to maybe stop your video share and turn it back on when you're back, that's how we'll know that you're here, those of you that have been showing your videos. See you in 5. but I feel like you may have also asked made the observation of the need to transition from the canal town mentality to trail town mentality. So I think there needs to be a whole group of ambassadors. One of the things that has happened with trail towns over the years is in places where there has been like one person really pushing the ball up the hill, that person gets tired. And so I suggest that in some of the programs that exist out there, require like that you have a committee of people, that of at least 5 or 6 people that are working together to push the idea of trail towns. A lot of the best programs around the country also, for their designation programs, they require that the town leadership is involved, that at least somebody from town leadership is on your committee, or that the town leadership is town council passes a resolution that says that they support the idea, or in Kentucky it has to be a county leader who actually submits the application. So the key there across all of those examples is that if you and 3 or 4 other residents are trying to do something, but your town leadership is not excited about trail towns, it's going to be really hard for you to make any change. So trying to get that your elected leadership and some of your thought leaders in your community is really important. Okay, why don't we get into the best practices and back into the PowerPoint. I think you should be able to see my share now. The best practices, as I define them, are here. And we're going to go through all of these. We're not going to give equal time to all of these, but I believe trail communities need to adopt a shared vision, physically connect trail to town, extend an invitation to use and enjoy the trail, cultivate a trail culture, know your market, share your story as a community, and commit to quality trails. These are 7 best practices. There are certainly other best practices that communities can aspire to, but these are the 7 that we're going to focus on today. Starting with adopting a shared vision and having a plan to get there. So listen, this is one of the ones I'm not going to talk a lot about, but it's so important to have a vision as a community, and to have plans that help you to realize your vision. And your community should ideally be including trails and use of trails and catering to trail users in your visioning and in your work at the community level. You have here on the left, this is like text language for it's a sample resolution that a trail community would pass to show and to demonstrate that they support their community becoming a trail town. And of course, this picture is intentional. We have to think about involving people of all ages in our trail work and in our community planning, people of all ages and of course all walks of life. And then another very basic, obvious one is to commit to quality trails, although it doesn't always happen. So my way of thinking about why this is so important is if we're thinking about rail trails alone, there are more than 2,000 rail trails around the United States. So what is it about yours that stands out? What's your special offer? What's the value proposition of your trail? To me, trail quality has a lot to do with it. If you want people to discover your trail and to return to it, you obviously need to take good care of it. And I believe that trail quality is not just about how it was designed and the surface and how it's maintained. I think part of quality includes destination appeal, bringing us back to the High Trestle Trail, which I showed you earlier in this fantastic artful bridge. Think about, and by the way, your trail does not have to be a high trestle trail with a bridge like this, but think about the things that you do and that your trail maintainers can do to make your trail special, to make it stand out, to make it destination worthy. So we are going to spend a little bit of extra time on the third best practice. And by the way, I have these all out of order just for purposes of this presentation, but for purposes of right now, the third practice we're looking at is the importance of physically connecting trail to town. I consider this sort of to be like Trail Towns 101, like the physical connections with amenities and infrastructure. This is like the tangible stuff that we can do to better connect to our trails. And it's in some ways, it's the easiest of all of these, right? Because it's something that it requires funds and effort, but we can usually get our arms around the idea of how to do physical connections. Some of you probably know this sculpture. This sculpture is in Frostburg, Maryland, along the Gap. Frostburg is a town that is challenged in the way of getting people into town because it's nearly a mile up the mountain, the downtown area, from the trail itself. That's a hard sell. I think it was Brian who mentioned that trail users are nervous sometimes about going into a community. And you know, it makes sense. You don't know sometimes if you're standing at a trailhead how far town is, what the services are, how safe is it to get there, how do I get there. People have a lot of questions, and sometimes it's easier just to keep going on to the next town. And it's our job as trail advocates, our collective job, to find ways to help people to feel informed and safe and comfortable. And a lot of that happens with physical connections, whether that's connector trails, protected bike lanes, signs and information kiosks that are drawing people into town, or an amazing sculpture like this that pulls people, that lures them in, from the trail toward town. These sculptures are located on a series of switchbacks. And so if you can just get to the first one, then maybe you can just get to the next one, and then you're that much closer to town. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Xenia. This is also an example of a physical connection. And some of these things are maybe not technically physically connecting trail to town, but there's a connection happening nonetheless when you're on the trail and you see that this community has a bike hub and it has these really cool artsy bike racks, that this community has made an investment in trails, and maybe I ought to go into town and see what's there. Or this town, Moorhead, Kentucky, which is a designated Kentucky trail town. It's along the Sheltowee Trace National Recreation Trail. And this trail is a lot of fun in the way of its blazes are shaped like the tortoise that you see here. And whenever you get into Moorhead, Kentucky, they carry that brand along the sidewalk of the downtown area. In fact, they reroute the trail to go through the downtown area. And you just see these, spray painted blazes that are familiar. And if this isn't a connection, I don't know what is. If this isn't an invitation into town, I don't know what is. And of course, a lot of you are probably also familiar with the town of London. And Jody is going to take a moment just to share a little bit about connections that have been made there.
Howdy, and I think we do have Greg Alexander and Wayne Roberts, who are they're directly related, but with the trail. But I wanted to share this here today. So in 2016, on opening day for trails, the Friends of Madison County Parks and Trails dedicated their new campsite, and it's along the trail there by the Madison County Senior Center. They created 3 of these wood platforms, and there is a standalone restroom building nearby and a covered picnic shelter. And so they created that in 2016. And then go ahead to the next slide there. Amy. Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
And so if you build it, they will come. In 2018, this photo was taken, a gentleman from Japan, and I'm not sure, a man or woman from France. So they met up at a campground in London, Ohio. So this has been a, how did they find out about it? And they have plenty more folks that have visited since then from Ohio and states beyond. But this shows that they extend, and people are coming to stay overnight there and during their route, their Ohio to Erie Trail, and cross country as well. This trail is also part of the Great American Rail Trail and US Bike Route 50, which goes east-west. So the central part has folks going both ways. Then to connect the folks from the campsite into town, there is a kiosk at each the east and the west part of the trail where it comes into the road route through London. And the kiosk lists the businesses, shows them on a map, and then as an added best practice, each year the Friends approaches these businesses and they charge them, I think, $25 per listing for the year. So they're engaging the businesses in the process, and that helps to offset the cost of providing that. So we hope to have one of our lightning sessions where Wayne and Greg will share more, but we wanted to share that today. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Jody. That's a really great example. I'm just going to guess that there aren't many places to camp along the Ohio to Erie Trail that have really nice elevated platforms like this. And so whenever I talk about, what's your town's or your trail's value proposition, what makes it stand out, it's this kind of stuff. This is a physical investment. So are the information kiosks you talked about. These are things to help trail users to see that your community cares about trails and the people who are using them. And you will probably notice that there's overlap between the 7 practices, right? Some of the things that I just showed had to do with physical connections, but they also are sending messages to people. They are doing what I call extending an invitation. I believe that whenever as a visiting trail user, you get to a trailhead or a trail access area and you have the opportunity to go and discover town, it's these kinds of physical things that are your first signs of hospitality. It's signs and art and sharrows on the road. You are inviting people off of the trail into your community through the physical. And sometimes if you have actual people there who are serving as ambassadors and greeting them and answering their questions as well, when you can do that, that's even better. So as I said earlier, the invitation works both ways. Again, it's not just inviting visiting trail users into your community. It's having a really serious, thoughtful conversation or series of conversations at the local level into how you are inviting your local residents to use and enjoy the trail. Not everyone needs an invitation, but certainly some people do. So to that point, I just wanted to share a story from Kentucky. So the Kentucky Trail Town program, its original manager was a woman by the name of Elaine Wilson, and she was visiting a small town that was located along the Trans-America Trail, US Bike Route 76. And she was talking to them and she said, oh, well, you must be seeing some benefit, at least from the bike route. And then the people she was meeting with said, well, no, not really. They just go on by. And her question back to them was, well, have you invited them in? And very simple question. But it's one worth considering. What are we doing to invite people into our communities and out to the trail? Again, a lot of the time has to do with physical signage and other physical indicators of trail culture and valuing trails and those who use them. So to that point, you know, I wanted to just go a little bit deeper here and ask you if you could put in the chat who in your community extends the invitation to trail users and to would-be trail users. Question really is, who's responsible for hospitality in your community? I'm going to stay in the presentation here. I'm going to ask Lisa if you can look and let me know if there are any responses coming in.
Not yet.
Yeah, there's always a delay. Who's responsible for hospitality?
Here's some. Okay, so people are saying trail volunteer workers who are encountering visitors. Greater Columbus, Metro Parks and Central Ohio Greenways, community leaders, 17 murals telling a historical story of the town. It's a nice way to welcome people. The coffee shop owner has taken on the role, but the mayor should be.
If we think about hospitality, I mean, if we're in a community in which, you know, trails and tourism are part of the community vision, then really we all are responsible for hospitality, right? It's our Chamber of Commerce, it's our local tourism organization, it's small businesses, it's local people who use the trail on a daily basis and can help to answer a question and point people toward town. It's local people who can invite their neighbors out to the trail. We really all are responsible for hospitality, and I encourage you to think some more about that. The question, who are we inviting? We're inviting everyone, and the point here is to not forget about our local residents, and the question around what are we inviting them to. I think, staying on the local resident track here, it's important to not see people throughout our communities simply as being potential trail users, but let's invite them to the conversation. Let's invite them to the planning. Let's do everything we can to create inclusive trail planning conversations that you know, get people who don't typically come out to a trails meeting. How do we get them there? I think the days of just shrugging our shoulders and saying, well, we tried, are over, and that we have to really be, you know, doing community processes in a way that's much more inclusive and robust than it used to be. And I also think that there's a lot of opportunity to invite our local residents and neighbors to be part of the trail economy and to benefit from the trail economy as well. So let's go on to the idea of, as a community, knowing your market. I shared some of the stats for the Gap earlier. You may, for the Ohio to Erie Trail, have some idea of trail user spending or economic impact. For the Gap, that $50 million annually, the way that breaks down for an individual is that the average day trip, the average local person out riding the trail is spending an average of $18 a day. For people who are who are visiting trail users, they're spending an average of $124 a night on their lodging alone. That's before they get into their meals and any other spending, transportation, shopping, etc. So there's a big difference there between those two averages, but it's important, whatever it is for your trail or your section of trail, to try to do the best you can to understand who's using your trail and who might be, if you were you know, doing, I guess, a better job of marketing, right? So understanding your market is very important, and you know, it's easy to see businesses that get it. The mugs on the right or on the left are excuse me, those are in a business along the C&O Canal. And the question is, well, why would that potter do that? Why would they sell that? Well, the answer is to sell mugs, but they know their market. They know that there are people visiting the trail that are looking for something to take away with them, and they're savvy enough to do that. This business on the right is in Illinois along the Kickapoo Trail. And they have just, they've done what I call put a bike on it. And you just basically, really decorate, to please the audience that you're trying to attract to your business. And so it makes sense for this business that is located right along the trail to have bikes all over the place. And I'm sure that you've seen plenty of examples of that. This is an image from, I think, the Dayton area. And there's a craft brewery along or near the Buckeye Trail that did a contest for artists to develop their label of their Trailtown brew. And I thought that was a lot of fun. But I think you can look to your craft brewers and certainly a lot of the time your local coffee shops, your local restaurants for great examples of businesses that have a good understanding of who their market is and how to reach them. So a couple of slides here about how to segment cyclists. And I recognize that there are all types of trail users that might enjoy your trails, but we're going to talk about cyclists here. This is what I found to be useful in terms of segmenting different types. This is from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and they consider there to be shoestring cyclists, economy cyclists, and comfort cyclists who tend to fall into these buckets of spending about these averages per day. Now, again, it's all about knowing your trail. It might be different along your trail, but this may give you just a basic idea of the different kinds of trail users that you may see out there. The photo is of myself with some trail users that I took on a trail experience on the Great Allegheny Passage last summer, and they most certainly fall into the comfort cyclist bucket. We hardly biked at all. We did 11 miles on the first day, biking from Ohio Powell to Confluence. We stayed in a guest house. We rented the whole house for a retreat experience, ate at local restaurants, and then the next day we biked 11 miles back to your car. Like I said, hardly any biking. It was a comfort cycling experience, and it was a group that was willing to spend for it. This is another way of looking at segmenting cyclists. This is something that I put together. I believe there to be people who are at different places on the spectrum in terms of how they enjoy trails. You have people that are budget travelers all the way up to luxury. So this would sort of fit with the Michigan concept that I just shared. People who are also rigorous cyclists, to casual. You have people, including everyone on this call today, that, there are some of us that might like to do 20 miles a day and others that might like to do 120 miles a day. And it's important just to spend some time trying to understand your own trail users and your trail market and how you can best accommodate them. This is not a tried and true, graph that, there's no data behind it, but it often tends to happen that people who are more casual in their cycling and trail use have some extra hours in their day because they're not trying to cover as many miles to go into town and to have a town experience. So let's talk about an example along the Ohio to Erie Trail. Tom, if you could share a bit about Ernie's Bicycle Shops.
Okay. I spent most of my life in Northeast Ohio, and I've known Ernie's Bike Shop for like about 15 years. And I think it exemplifies what Amy's been talking about. For those not familiar, Ernie's Bike Shop is in Massillon. It's on the Ohio to Erie Trail, and it also is on the Ohio and Erie Canal Trail and just off of the Sippo Valley Trail. And what's interesting about this is that the Ohio to Erie Trail, the Ohio and Erie Canal Trail gets a lot of press and a lot of glamour from the northern end of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park and passing through Cleveland and Akron. And Massillon sits about, I'd say an hour, 15 minutes south of Cleveland and 45 minutes south of Akron. So not as highly visited, But what makes Ernie's bike shop interesting is that the bike shop is built at a trailhead in Massillon, and he's a full service bike shop, but he's much more than that. He recognized the need of services. Across the parking lot is the Tuscarawas River, which is in that particular area is used for kayaking, canoeing. So Ernie operates a canoe livery in addition to the bike shop. And he also combines the two. He has a program called Pedal Paddle. I think that's the name of it. And basically you can go out, start your ride down at Ernie's and bike wherever you want, north to Canal Fulton or south to Bolivar or wherever, and end up about 3 or 6 miles north of Massillon, and you're Ernie will have canoes or kayaks ready, and they will take your bikes back so you can spend a few hours on the river. So it's kind of a nice thing. At the same time, he orients himself to day cyclists in a really nice way. He operates a cafe, a casual cafe, the Blue Heron Cafe. And what's nice about it, it's like a soup and sandwich type of shop, and very nice. And it also has ice cream. People are always attracted to ice cream on bike rides. And if you look at the structure of Ernie's, that picture, he has very wide porch and a lot of lawn there. He has ample picnic tables, and he has rockers on the porch, and he just invites people to sit there. What's key about this is I think Ernie is key in attracting people to the Ohio-Erie Trail down there on the south end of the Ohio-Erie Canal Trail, because he adds something to it. He has a beautiful trailhead with facilities that everybody like. If you want to head south to see historic Zoar on Ohio and Erie Canal Trail, you can do that easily, only 20 miles from Ernie's. If you want to head out into Amish country through Dalton, you can do that easily in 20 miles. If you want to head up to Canal Fulton, it's only 8 miles. And there are a lot, as Brian said, a lot of people don't discover Canal Fulton, but Canal Fulton has some nice restaurants and also some bike shops. So Ernie, in this bike shop, enabled people to visit that Massillon area. He engaged himself in the community, and that's something I think is key here with Ernie. He hosts bike rides out of the shop, moonlight rides. Twice a year, he does like a fun poker run to benefit both trails that cross through his area. So he engages people. And I know that Ernie and his staff is very active in active transportation initiatives in that Western Stark County area, and also the business organization. And I think that opened Massillon up for a whole different level of tourism they probably didn't expect, because if you go just a half a mile south on the canal trail, you're to an area of Massillon which now has built restaurants and so forth over the last few years, have worked on that gate, as Amy talked about, what's that gateway into town, and they tried to make that easier and more friendly so people can go off and eat and explore Massillon. He's really a good example of somebody who you would say, oh, this is just a bike shop, but it's much, much more. And I would think if you talk to some of those visitors along the way down, those businesses down in Massillon, they would tell you that it really made an impact. So a really good example of a business that can look beyond selling bikes or little, bike accessories to cyclists, to turn that into something more for the community. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That's a great example. I've not been to Ernie's, but I'm familiar with Ernie's. And
Can I piggyback on that?
What? Yeah, go right ahead.
So Ernie's wife also bought a gorgeous stone house in Navarre and uses that as an Airbnb, and it's adorable too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, great. Some people just get it, right? They're just entrepreneurs, and they understand how to meet the market need. And I heard in what you were saying, Tom, that they are, obviously catering to visiting trail users, but they're doing things for local people as well. I bet you that a moonlight bike ride is probably drawing mostly local residents who are out to enjoy the trail and just part of part of that building trail culture in that community. So there's something to be said for diversifying, who you're catering to also. And to that point, I wanted to just give you a quick example of an outfitter in rural Virginia. This is Twin Rivers Outfitters, and it's located along the James River, and they do float trips. And one thing that I found to be fascinating whenever I met the owner of Twin Rivers is that he told me that a third of the company's revenues come from 10% of its customer base. And that's because almost everyone that goes to their outfitter is going there for a $20 tubing experience. So they're renting an inner tube and they're floating the river for a couple of hours. But they also have this market of people that are doing multi-day paddle trips where they're paying $169 a person, for the support from the outfitter. And so you have that niche market that is responsible for a disproportionate amount of their annual revenues. And I think that's something that's always interesting to think about whenever we're thinking about multi-use trails and cycling. It's true in cycling that people who are doing multi-day trips are contributing a disproportionate amount to our local economies. And it's important to be aware of that and to cater to that audience. The thing that I also don't want to lose sight of is that we have opportunities with more of like the mass market, more of those casual cyclists, the comfort cyclists that are just going out for a few hours. There is money to be made there for those of you who are in business. And there are ways to create trail in town experiences that will help to boost that relatively modest average spending. Like I said, for the Gap, $18 is an average for a day tripper along the Gap. There are ways to create experiences and packages that can boost that daily spending and get more of your local and regional people enjoying your trails. So with that said, I'm going to go to the sixth practice, and just to remind you, we have 7. So after we get through these next couple of practices, we will wind down with a little bit of Q&A and have you out of here by 1:30. So sixth practice is share your story. You're sharing your community story, and those of you that are working more at the regional level, sharing your trail story. It is just so important that we find ways to connect with our trail users and to have them have a special experience in our communities and one that they might remember and talk about and want to revisit. I love this quote: "To survive, you must tell stories." This takes me back to that idea of community pain points and the struggles that our communities have faced. And I think it's stories and culture and heritage that help to anchor our communities through good times and bad. And it's important that we find ways to share with both our residents and our visitors what is special about this place. Like I said, over 2,000 rail trails around the United States. What makes this trail special? What makes this community special? And that storytelling comes in all forms. There are so many ways to do good storytelling. I don't know if any of you have been to this spot along the Great Allegheny Passage. This is Rachel Sager. She owns Sager Mosaics, and she calls this spot the Ruins. This is probably 50 feet off the trail, and she took an abandoned coal mine and converted it to host mosaic art. So this is like the biggest and grandest of the pieces, but if you walk around these walls, you're going to see all sorts of different great art from different mosaicists from around the world, hers and those of other people that she invites to make art there. And when she tells this story, it's, there's a story about culture and industry. It's an abandoned coal mine that has been put to a new use. There's new life here at the Ruins, and she makes it personal. She she actually has her father and her grandfather worked in the coal mines, and now she's working this land in a different kind of a way. So storytelling can be very powerful. And when I talked, just to connect this back to knowing your market, when I talked about creating and offering experiences for your trail users, this summer I went and did a ride on the Gap. It was just a day trip, and I took a guided tour at Sager Mosaics. So instead of me being an $18 a day spender that day, I was more like a $50 or $60 spender, because I paid for the guided tour. I, also had lunch, also had beer, probably had an ice cream. So there are ways to create trail experiences that work for our local businesses as well. The picture to the right is of someone I had at another time to Sager Mosaics, and we actually had her and her cohorts like working with the tile, which is a way to like invite people into the story, make them a part of the story by creating an immersive tactile experience for them. Like I said, you can tell storytelling in all kinds of ways. This is in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I spent some time in Indiana doing Trail Town presentations last fall. I know a few of you are from Indiana on the call today. And I just was so taken aback by this mural, which takes up the entire side of a building. And you have the passenger pigeons here, which are now extinct, along with the bison, which no longer roam that part of the country. And this is a story that reaches way back. Art, of course, is a great way of storytelling. Or the Levi Dio Mansion on the Great Allegheny Passage in Myersdale. I had a group there, and the B&B owner showed us how to make burnt sugar and to turn it into an icing and to put it onto muffins. And so again, if you're not familiar with the concept of experiential travel, I encourage you to look into it, because I think this is sort of one of the next places we can go with trails, is working with our community nonprofits and our local businesses to create experiences that are immersive and memorable. And what's more memorable than having a chance to ice your own cupcake and then to enjoy it? Seventh practice is to cultivate a trail culture. This is one that sort of, I guess you could say, you find it in each of the other practices. And like I said before, there's a lot of overlap between the practices, but it's so important that we, at the community level, are able to cultivate a culture that values trails and embraces in them. I have these two related statements that I think are really important to share. First is, it's an underlying trail culture that sustains an outdoor economy and keeps bringing people back to your trail in town. I know that a lot of you are looking for economic opportunities, and I get that. And my take on it is that it's the culture. If you have a culture that values and embraces trails, then that outdoor economy is more authentic. It's less transactional, and I think it's more sustainable. Second comment: without a culture that celebrates and invests in trails, communities are setting the stage for a transactional economy. So same idea. If you're looking for transactional, that's fine. But if you're looking for true community change and to have a culture that supports and values trails over time, we have to work on the culture, and the economic piece will come along with it. So I wanted to pause here and have Lisa talk a little bit about how trail culture shows up in Mount Vernon.
Yeah, so I live about an hour drive time from Mount Vernon, but honestly, I probably bike more in Mount Vernon than I do within 5 miles of my house. And the reason being has to do with the way that they've approached trail visitors. So this example that's showing on your screen is a new installation, and it is a fountain that features dogs, and I'm a big dog lover. I think there's also a cat thrown in there just for fun. But they've made this piece of public art right in the downtown area, a draw to get you into the downtown area. Even, if you have maybe no plans to either shop at one of the great stores they have or even eat at one of the restaurants, there are so many Facebook posts about this fountain that it really drew a lot of people over last summer when it got installed, and it will continue to draw people into town. I rode with a few friends over the summer in the Mount Vernon area, and we always had to come and see the fountain. And then guess what we did? Oh, well, we got lured into one of those shops that we didn't really have plans to go to. There's a bike store nearby. There's a great brewery, restaurant nearby. And even though we said, oh, we're not hungry or we don't need anything, we found ourselves getting lured in even further. So this is a great example of how they took, I think it was maybe Tom's from Mount Vernon area. I think it was just an empty lot, right, Tom? What was there before? Do you know? Or maybe a little park or something? I don't know.
It was just it was a small parking lot with a very small park with a few benches. It's
Okay.
It's actually, this is part of Mount Vernon Nazarene's University downtown campus.
Okay. So really nothing that would have, said, oh, we got to go see this park, but now it became something. And this is just another example in downtown Mount Vernon as you come off the trail. Again, the iconic, not just a bike rack, but something that just adds a little interest and is a welcoming sign. As a cyclist, I look at this and go, oh, this town gets it. And this is a little entryway park that also is new in the area as well. And again, kind of a gateway into the downtown, a way that as I'm riding, I can see easily how to get downtown. It's just a little jump off the trail, but if some of these features weren't there, I'd ride right past it. I really would. I'm not the kind of person that feels the need to stop in a town, but I did a lot this summer in Mount Vernon. So thank you. There's some questions I see here that I don't know if we have time to get to them or not, but
I can't see them at the moment, but we're going to be getting to them in a few minutes. So if they look like the kinds of questions that can wait, we will take those in just a few minutes. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Yeah, people are
Okay.
just posting some other good things that Mount Vernon has done. And absolutely, in the essence of time, I haven't mentioned some of those things, but you all know.
Yeah, so I clearly have not seen enough of the Ohio to Erie Trail, and I have to tell you that will change. I think in 2021, I need to get over and see Mount Vernon for starters. And what Lisa just talked about, she talked about gateway moments. The picture you're looking at right now, this is a gateway moment. And if your community doesn't have one from the perspective of the trail, I would think about what kind of a gateway moment can you create. And then when you get back into to this picture of the fountain, which is brilliant, by the way, it's just like so whimsical and cute, and it obviously has become a point of interest and something that people are sharing all over social media. What's a point of interest in your community that people, trail users, might know about and feel compelled to make the trek into town so that they can experience it. I'm not kidding. I will plan a trip next summer to go to see this fountain, as silly as that may sound. Like I see this picture and I see an investment, I see a certain vibe, and it's the kind of town I want to see more of. So to that point, a lot of the things we've been looking at today While physical items, they are vibrancy indicators, right? They are telling and signaling to people, both the people who live in your community and the people who don't, something about this community's culture and where it places its value. And that really, really matters. The last slide that I have related to trail culture is from a storefront in Franklin, Pennsylvania. And in Franklin, at this local yarn shop, I was there a couple of years ago walking by, and then I noticed this window display. And you have the owner of a yarn shop decided to cover a bike from head to toe, we'll say, with yarn and put it in the window, along with a sign that points to the bike trail, some trail brochures. I mean, how fun is this? And people sometimes ask me, like, how do you know if you've achieved the trail culture? And to me, this is the answer. It's whenever a business that has nothing to do with trails and cycling decides to do something like this. It says something about what the community thinks about its trails. And so what you've had here across these 7 practices, what you have is a series of seemingly unnecessary practices that together improve quality of life, bring delight, and are indicative of culture. These things, when we pull them all together, really just make life more delightful, and you know, in a lot of cases, just make life better. For the people who live in your communities and for those who are visiting. So that is what I have. We have still another 12 minutes. So why don't we go ahead with discussion?
So I was going to make a suggestion to everybody. So Lisa, you can actually go onto Google. It's Google My Maps. I believe if you search that, you can actually go and create maps. And it would be really great to see a map on the OTET site that has all the friends on the trail. So, and for everybody else involved, this is free. You can actually go create the map. You can embed it on your website. And each one of you in your local community, you can add all the different waypoints. And you can actually put in custom pictures. And when people click on the little flags, the information slides from the left to the right. You can actually see their website, contact information. And it's just a wonderful way to kind of promote the people in your local areas. And again, it's free. I mean, all you need to do is embed the map on your website. And then individually, it's very beneficial for search engine optimization. Google likes it when you have maps. And when you add these maps, obviously it attracts Google to you because it's showing local areas and you're identifying things for Google. So, but it would be really neat if maybe we get a page on the OTET website with the friends, where it actually shows on the trail the locations of the friends. That was just a suggestion that I was going to make. And I've already done that. The OTET map that you guys have created is on my website. Your map is actually on my website.
That's a great suggestion. I mean, you really, you were just cementing the idea that there are a lot of details in this work. Like, we're talking about partnerships at a regional level, and there's like a lot of nitty gritty work to just do in terms of just, like, you know, creating the maps, supporting each other, promoting other businesses. And I'm glad that you sort of like have your eye on that work that needs to be done. There are definitely a lot of moving parts when we're talking about a trail as long as the Ohio to Erie Trail. Lisa, I think maybe you were going to say something.
I was going to say something.
Okay.
The Ohio to Erie Trail interactive map does use Google Maps, Louis, and we have added a variety of layers. We do not have that layer. It's a very good suggestion. We do have a person who maintains that, so Lisa, Jody, and I can get with that person. But we do use Google Maps, and there are layers. Locally, the Heart of Ohio Trail does have a Google Maps with that type of information. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Questions about trail towns. Questions about some ways to become more trail friendly at the community level.
Is there any way that we could get maybe some sort of a plaque or something to identify on my property that I am a friend on the trail?
Is there
So
anything
something, you know, that
exist?
establishes the OTET, you know, a friend on the trail.
I think that's regional now, Louis. Knox County was ready to roll out a beautiful program, and the pandemic struck. And they have created a lot of criteria to be bicycle friendly and be a friend of the trail, and a logo, and like you said, a little sticker for the window. But yeah, I think there are probably pockets along the trail that do that. So.
Mhm.
And Louis, I would recommend reaching out to the Magi. Is that the Maslin?
Maslin Greenways?
And isn't that the local trail friends group for that region?
Yes, it is.
I don't know what the Magi stands for.
Maslin Area Greenways Incorporated.
Okay, thank you.
Tom, I see you had a question. What do you think about themed trails on a trail, such as coffee or brewery trails? I think it's great. I think, you know, and you've seen it, right? There's everything from ice cream to coffee, craft beer, pie, culinary experiences paired with trails tend to work really well, and this is where, you know, you can, you know, if you have, this is where I would embrace and connect with your tourism partners first of all. An example is in Ontario, in the Kawarthas region, where they have a Trail Town program. They also are known for their butter tarts, and they have something like 75 or 80 bakeries around the region that are serving butter tarts, and people are driving around to these different bakeries and sampling them. Now that's mostly a driving experience, but culinary experiences can be created in your region, and there's no shortage of creative ways to connect those experiences back to your trail.
Well, and I think an example of that is if you're a winery hopper like I am, we go to all the winery trails, be it north, south, or, you know, up in Geneva or whatever, and you get a map and you go to all the wineries. But also along with that are those highway signs that say, get off on this exit because you're going to hit so many wineries when you get off. And so I think that's a key to the trail, is guiding people off your trail and telling them what they're going to hit there.
People need sometimes a fair amount of guidance to help them to better experience your place, right, and your region. And so it's, the onus is on us to create those brochures, to place those signs, to make, you know, the decision to come into town easier and more of a no-brainer, right? You make it an easy decision for people to come and experience our places. Okay. All right. Somebody had asked whether the webinar would be recorded or whether the link would be shared. It certainly will. And if there are no other questions, I will, well, first I'd like to just encourage you to keep going. We put a lot in front of you today about trail towns and how to become more trail friendly. You can't do this on your own. I'm sure you've already figured that out. You have to work at a partnership level, find your partners and do the things that you can do to better create that culture and make the most of your trails. That's my parting message to you. And with that, I'm going to turn it, I think, back to Jody for closing words.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I did just put a link in the chat box. So this was the kickoff for our virtual workshops. And in January on the 13th, we'll have folks from the Rails to Trails Conservancy talking about resources, and maybe it might answer some of these questions about where to begin with funding and reaching out to your local officials. And then we invite you back to the next chapter in our discussion with Amy on Wednesday, the 27th at the same time. And at that point, we're going to be reaching out to you and asking, what do you want to hear more about, or what would be helpful to help you connect with your, the other trail enthusiasts near you. And so this is really to help translate this information into action steps that can help you achieve your goals. So,
Jody, if I could say, I'm sorry.
yes, please do.
Yeah, that conversation will look and feel different from this one. This is to give you a broad idea of what Trail Towns is all about and how it's been implemented in different places. Like that's sort of like the next conversation. There might not even be a PowerPoint. It might just be a discussion among people that are really, really interested in trail towns and trail friendly practices. So if you think that sounds like you, I hope you'll join us.
And at that one, we may have the breakout sessions that are based on geography so that you are, speaking with people about your local trail area. Well, I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to quickly introduce some of our other board members. Our president, Mike Graber, is on the call. And I saw Matt Simpson. And have I left off? Tom is, Lisa and I are kind of the here. And so actively, I think that Wade, our new member, was registered.
Yeah, he's here.
So it's Wade Johnston is one of our new board members, and we welcome him. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you got some ideas from this. This is just the beginning of the conversation. We want to support you all in creating a trail presence that connects trail to town, and see where we can go from here.
I'd like to make a closing statement.
Yes, please.
So just one last thing is I really have to applaud Jody's effort for bringing this forward. I mean, we did a lot of planning for the conference, and I think making these conference sessions virtual is pretty important. But you're also going to see the trail realizes the value of these virtual events. So also in the planning, we don't have the details announced quite yet, but we're going to do a series of monthly visiting Ohio to Erie Trail webinars. The first one will be an overview, then we'll go by region. So sort of back to what Louis was talking about earlier. We see those 4 regional ones not being me talking or so forth, but actually being some people from those regions inviting. So the overview one will say this is what it's like to cycle the Ohio to Erie Trail and give people a taste. And then we will then go into 4 separate webinars that reach into those different regions. So I just wanted to make you aware of that too. Back to you, Jody. So.
I think that's everything.
Mm-hmm.
We'll follow up with a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation. And please, registration is now open for the 2 in January. So please get yourself signed up so we can continue the conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.